Uh, Greetings, live videoers, and if I post on YouTubers. Um, this is a response to G2 video on 10 questions that every intelligent Christian must answer. And he gave a list of people that would qualify to answer these questions: software developers, doctors, and other people. I worked for the family care industry. I have an associate's degree and a 4-year college degree, and I like to think of myself as a Christian. However, because of the type of research and the things I say, maybe I'm not as evangelical as some. And you mentioned a lot about making excuses for God and the like. I don't view it as making excuses or exceptions. So I'm going to try to go through. I'm not going to get all of these. I tried to copy some of these down, so I'm going to look. Miracles in the medical profession. A lot of times people attribute miracles to things that they can't explain. So whereas before Jesus might heal somebody from an epileptic seizure, blah blah blah, it may have been just some kind of form of modern day temporary cure. What we're seeing today is a lot of educated people attribute the works of doctors and things that they don't understand, cures for cancer, or the remission of cancer, things like that, and the advancements in the medical field today, they attribute that to miracles. You mentioned, why can't an amputee grow an arm if there's miracles in the if it's attributed to miracles? Someday they will be able to you'll be able to grow body parts in a petri dish based on cells, and I believe that the Christian community, would attribute that to miracles. So this isn't really an explanation, which I wouldn't be able to do. I guess it's all just, for the most part, in a matter of opinion. But a lot of times I see that happening is, somebody, oh, the doctor said, and God gave the doctor the knowledge or means by which I'm healed. So that's one explanation or possibility. Another one is anti-scientific resource. The biblical text, especially the Old Testament, in the setting and time period it was written, is not out of the ordinary for the other ancient Near Eastern texts that were written in that time period. Back then, science and religion were melted together because it was the only way of explaining how things came to be. And these mythologies and motifs and the creators as archetypes were developed, the creator archetype were developed in order to explain the universe to people, and even non-religious people back then believed these sorts of explanations for how things came to be. For instance, the creation of man out of clay, in the ancient Near East, the god Marduk. There's a story of Uma Elish and their creation of man, mostly made. A lot of times in the Near East, you have creations made out of mud and sticks. There's a Egyptian creation of man in the Temple of Esna that was built to the god Khnum. He forms man on the pottery wheel, so there's an idea possibly where the Hebrews could have attracted that sort of idea about man being created from the clay. So I see, thinking critically about it, I see science as an extension of the deity's arm, where we're supposed to question and rip everything apart and ask the tough questions. And a lot of times we're afraid to do that, as you explained. So number two, well, this would probably be three. Why do good things happen to bad people? Bad things happen to good people. Bad things happen to bad people. I think that the Jewish idea in the Old Testament they're all Jewish texts, the whole Bible. So in Jewish literature, it was thought that if you sinned against God, the norm, if you sinned against God, then bad things would happen to you. However, if you read the literature, that kind of thinking was rebutted by some people as being the wrong kind of thinking. Back then, it was about the covenant. You break the covenant or the rules of Yahweh, then bad things would happen. It didn't have anything to do with the situation that you were in. Job, the text of Job, the last and first chapter might have been added on later. So if you skip and go right to chapter 2 and start reading, that's the whole philosophy of rebutting the idea of why bad things happen to bad people, because they must have been bad. So so there are a lot of accounts and stories that dealt with that sort of thing. And in the New Testament, I believe the idea was floating around that it rains on the just and unjust. So bad things happen to everybody, good things happen to everybody. So I guess we're all in the same soup according to the biblical text. Excuse me. I'm not too sure about the divorce rate. 50% of all people get divorced here in America, at least. That's the divorce rate. When it comes to divorce, you would think that Christians would be more onto that, simply because of the strong religious convictions and rules and moral values that they claim to have. However, there are some issues with that, and you're very right about that, and there's probably no explanation for that. Slavery in the Bible, also too, it's in the context of the ancient Near Eastern texts. You have plenty of writings and from the Babylonians, the Hittites, Egyptian, Persian, of the rulers or the heroes bragging to the gods how much they brought back, and slavery, and what they're going to do to people, and what they did to the people who didn't believe. So back then, in that context, it was all slice and dice. So the Bible, in perspective, for that time period, in the setting in which they wrote, was really no different than the other nations that they had to live with in the region. A really good text, which has been out for years and a lot of Bible scholars use it, is ancient Near Eastern texts relating to the Old Testament. And I think that a lot of people would find that extremely helpful to read that if you're trying to think about and dig into some of these issues. A lot of times people do create excuses to explain the unknown. I think that it's just a natural thing that man does. And a lot of times people forget that religion itself progresses as understanding happens. And as science happens, our idea about religion changes, and it has to change in order for it to survive. Same thing with science. Science, it's based a lot of times, not all the time, if it's a law of nature, then it's pretty well established. But if it's a scientific discovery or something they're working on, it's a hypothesis. And science also, too, has to change and as it progresses. Because if it were ever tried to remain stationary, a lot of issues would be created. And that's why today I believe that religion has the issues that it does, especially with evangelical Christians, is because they say our God's an unchanging God. However, they never allowed it to change, even though it does change. And that's the thing about a myth or mythology and how it works. A myth is a fact that never happened, but continues to happen in modern day life. You mentioned eating the God. Yes, very gross. However, as in heaven, so below. And if you can create that on the earth as part of a ritual, as ingesting the God, it's believed that you become more like the God, or you are caused to reflect on the deeds of that God. In Fraser's Golden Bough, he has a whole chapter on different traditions and the magical rites and things that go with the ingestion of a God. As far as the Jesus miracles, especially in the New Testament, a lot of times a lot of works and a lot of history is attached to a hero, almost in any religion. And with Christianity, Christ was likened to Elijah and Elisha, in that almost every miracle that Elisha did, Christ was attributed to doing that 10 times bigger. You can go through all the miracles and find the same things in the Old Testament. Now, originally in the Old Testament, Elisha, it was attributed to him that he performed these miracles in retaliation to the Baal cult. And the Yahwehistic cult and the Baal cult were in competition during that time, because King Ahab and Jezebel were on the throne, and Jezebel wanted to institute Baalism as a state religion. So the mission of Elijah and Elisha, a separate form of religion and more conservative form of religion in the Israeli community at that time. This is besides the king and the state religion of Yahweh. The prophets were in strong retaliation to Baalism, and so almost all the miracles that happened in with Elijah and Elisha were saying that Yahweh also could do these too, because Baal was known as the storm god to withhold rain when he went to the underworld and died in his battle against Mot. Then Anat had to go down and kill Mot. So the rain stopped, and because Baal and his daughters were in the underworld. So Elisha withheld the rain, saying, well, Yahweh is also important, and he can do these things. Same thing for raising the dead. You have accounts where the sick are healed, and women becoming pregnant who were barren. In the Canaanite texts from the Ugaritic texts, El and Baal end up blessing a man who had no children and his wife, and they were able to have children. So there's usually accounts. These accounts were in strict retaliation to Baalism. Also, a lot of things that happened in the New Testament were strict retaliation to the Roman emperor cult and the Greek Hellenization, which, well, Rome came later, Greeks first. So if you think about it in that context, as a form of storytelling and mythology, you can see how the ideas came about. And probably one of the most important thing about the biblical text and why I appreciate it so much, and thinking about it critically, allowed me to understand that the whole thing is an epic. And the epic is very important to bind people as a community, to have rites of passage, to be able to identify with each other in a community, and to explain where your beginnings were as far as theology is concerned, and your right to be who you are and a part of that community. To tell a child the story, the epic story of the Israelis, to say if you were Hebrew or part of the Yahwehistic cult, that a God formed you from his very hands, from the earth, is a pretty good start as far as being included in that community. So hopefully this might, in some attempt, a humble attempt to explain some of your questions. Okay, enjoyed your video, and take care.